My biggest insight for scaling a business phrase is retention is the foundation of growth. What that means is you just have to try and build a product or service that's better in some way than all your competitors. If you do that, marketing is just really fucking easy. Everybody should be creating content on the internet. It's like a cheat code basically for growing a business, making money. So that job of creating content on the internet, podcast, email list, social, is a forever job. It's something that you should be doing forever. It's a very profitable way of making money once you grow to a certain scale. Fame became a Bitcoin accumulation machine. It was like no longer a business. The business exists, the whole thing, that entity exists to get more Bitcoin. But you have to work out some other way of getting a better deal from that job. And that could be that you have a future vision to do what I did and take this thing and go and sell it to other people. Or it could be because you just need to learn skills to do this other thing in the future. You basically have to work out some other way of getting a benefit from the job to increase your future ability to buy Bitcoin, or future earnings or ability to buy Bitcoin. It's the same thing.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Sean. Today, joining us is Tom Hunt, a British entrepreneur, best known as the founder and CEO of Fame, a B2B podcast production agency that helps companies launch and scale podcasts as the growth and branding channel. Under Tom's leadership, Fame has grown to over 70 full-time remote employees and just reached 4.2 million in annual recurring revenue, ARR, all without external funding, which is absolutely mind-blowing. Tom, welcome to the show. 2 weeks ago, you put out this cryptic post on X about an $800,000 Bitcoin purchase. Do you care to explain?
Thanks, Sean. So the Bitcoin story goes back to 2014, where I made a probably even stupider decision. And that was, oh God, basically my dad's mum, had a family friend who we used to see a bit, but she was quite old, and sadly she passed away. And she left X amount of cash, like more money, obviously, than I had back then, a lot more money than I had back then, to all of the grandchildren of Gran. And we got the money when we were like 16. And so then we couldn't really control it. Our parents had to manage that. And so I remember putting the whole chunk into this, like, there's a bank in the UK called Halifax. You put the money in and then it's locked for 5 years. And so I put the money in, it's locked for 5 years, and it comes back out 10% higher. So we got 10% over 5 years. To me, that didn't sound great. So, but by the time it came out, I was 18 or 19. And so I had control. I was like living in London at uni. And then I just put 75% of it in Bitcoin. This is 2014.
Let's go.
And so the real gift there, though, is that when you have, because that was like 90% of my net worth at the time. So that really forces you to learn about the asset. There's no initial thesis on the buy. It was like, it just after the 2014 spike to $1,000. And so I've gone about 449. And so I was just waiting for it to go back to 1,000, then I was going to sell. But then with this massive chunk of net worth in Bitcoin, I had to learn about it. And so then a decade later, now we're here. So let's focus on your question. Fame bootstrapped, I own 100%. So we're building up this cash balance. And my bullishness on Bitcoin does go up and down, as probably like every hodler. But more recently, I've just got really, really bullish, even at close to all-time highs. And so we just moved the whole treasury over to Bitcoin. And so now Fame is, well, it depends how you describe a Bitcoin treasury company, right?
That's contentious.
We do have a real business, and we are probably not going to do what the other companies are doing. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But we're still going to run the real business, but just keep our cash in Bitcoin, because I think it's best. As Saylor said in 2020, everything else is a melting ice cube.
100%. I want to actually go back to 2014. So before the show, we were saying I first heard about Bitcoin 2013 when it was $96 Australian, didn't buy it, and was a degenerate. Probably worked out the better. At least that's the story I'm going with. But for me, like coming in 2019, there's so much education. There's so many podcasts, there's so many books and stuff like coming out more and more and more. And over the last 5 years, there's just been an explosion of information, knowledge. Like, where were you learning about Bitcoin? Where were you getting the signal back in 2014? Was it Reddit forums, or where was that?
Yeah, the number one place was r/Bitcoin subreddit. And then probably the number two pick, I do remember CoinDesk. I don't know if CoinDesk was launched then, but it's basically CoinDesk and the Bitcoin subreddit, which is where all the info was. I don't even know if I was listening to podcasts back then, and there might have been a couple, like really old ones. Andreas Antonopoulos, he was like the absolute OG. So he did interviews on podcasts. He also wrote Internet Money Volume 1 and 2, which two like epic Bitcoin books in my opinion. So it was him, the Bitcoin subreddit, and CoinDesk was where I was able to get the info.
Love it. Antonopoulos was probably the guy that orange pilled me right at the start back in 2019 as well. Just absolutely amazing. Highly suggest reading those books. Want to go on a little bit of a tangent because you said books. It's one of my favorite words. Listening to a lot of your podcasts over the last couple of weeks, it sounds like you're a voracious reader. Tom, is that true? And I guess in regards to Bitcoin, what are some of your favorite books?
Yeah, I'm quite introverted, so I find it hard to like be around groups of people, but I find it very easy to be on my own and read.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think in the last decade, I've maybe tried to read like between 20 and 50 books a year, maybe. No, I've never got to 50. Bitcoin books, though, the most recent one I read for the second time, because I don't think I finished it the first time, is The Mandibles. Have you heard about that one?
Yeah,
God.
it's a fantastic book, man. Must read.
Epic, must read. Like, it's like a horror story, you know? But that was scary. For listeners, it's set in like 2029 and 2047, and it's as if like the US dollar has failed basically, and there's like a Mexican president, and it's horrible. So that's up there. That's more recent. I think in terms of the classics, you have the Bitcoin Standard, obviously, Internet Money Volume 1 and 2. I do like more recent ones like Lynn Alden's Broken Money and Lawrence Lepard's The Big Print. But maybe they're just coming to my mind because they're more recent. There was one that had the best Satoshi investigation. I know people don't like doxing Satoshi, but there's a book called Digital Gold by, I think, Nathaniel. I'll look at the author in a second. And what I loved about that one, I listened to this like 8 years ago, was that it had a really good investigation into who Satoshi could be, and all the clues like Satoshi left behind. Because they also like true crime podcasts and true crime books, you know. So it like brought those two genres together. But I think those five, if anyone reads those five, I think it'd be quite hard for anyone not to be like super bullish.
100%. I've been giving out a lot of books, whether it's like Beers for Bitcoin or The Big Print as a starter. And some people will be like, I finished that book. I'm like, great. Like, here's another book, you know, because you know that they need to get to 2, 3, really like 3 books or 100 hours before it starts to click. And then I've got sort of a bit of an order. If that Mandibles book, I think it's absolutely amazing. But if you're looking for like the bright side of Bitcoin and where we're heading on Bitcoin Standard, Parallel by Brian Dement, absolutely fantastic.
Oh, nice. I haven't heard of that.
It's really good. I'm going to have him back on. I've had Brian on, really good mate of mine, 4 times, I think, on the show. But I'll probably do a podcast in another two weeks. It's he wrote Bitcoin Evangelism as well. And I guess like when people are starting into Bitcoin, I would strongly just recommend the Big Print. I think it's the most accessible for like everyone out there to understand what the problem is, what the solution is, like why Bitcoin, why gold to an extent, but why Bitcoin's better than gold. Lays it out like super easy. If they're really technical, if they've got like a PhD type brain, the Bitcoin Standard, or if they're after a good read to be able to get orange pilled in the first place, Brian's first book, Bitcoin Evangelism, is fantastic. And then followed by like Parallel as the second reading book, and then maybe something like The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. And then they could sort of read anything in between. But another book, and it's intense, and you probably want to read a couple of feel-good books first, Tom, is Crypto Sovereignty by Eric Kaysen.
Oh, nice.
And dude, so insane. He's like the 8th employee at Coinbase, and he's just full libertarian. He's just no fucks given, full anarchist. It's incredible. Straight shooter, but it's not a first book. I think it needs to be at least 5th or 6th on the reading list. I think anything before then is going to scare people away.
I've got a couple that are not actually Bitcoin books that helped orange pill me. the first, this was like the biggest orange pilling moment, I think. Second, or the second biggest was Saylor buying in 2020. This was the first. The book called The Evolution of Everything by Matt Ridley. And he's a biologist, or used to be a biologist. And he basically, the basic theory of the book is that the best things in life, like life itself, the internet, etc., evolve from the bottom up, like evolution, etc., not from top-down control. And so he just goes through like 10 different examples of this, and he does cover Bitcoin in it. And he's essentially saying that we have the people at the top trying to control the money with the top-down perspective, but over time, often the bottom-up phenomena become more powerful and more successful. And so I kind of connected that to Bitcoin being the bottom-up movement versus the top-down government-controlled money. The second one, more recently, is, have you read Laws of Easy Money? It's basically a history of the Fed.
Yeah, Lawrence Lepard recommended it to me before his book came out. So I read that, and then his book came out a couple of weeks later. Just
that's
insane.
Yeah, so there we go. That's the. I think we said about 10 there, right? I reckon if people get halfway through that list, then they're going to be orange pilled for sure.
Dude, one of my favorite things, and I can strongly relate to being an introvert, is just reading. You know, I've got this saying, read the books or eat the bugs, which is actually in this book on page 157. Made it in there. But I just think the only way that we're ever going to change is through new information and putting that information and putting that new information into practice and then testing it and being able to fail forward. And if we're not getting the new information, it's I don't think there's any growth. But something that you said was in regards to like government control, government manipulation. We'll get into like the B2B, and I guess for everyone just watching, like we've gone on this little bit of a tangent about reading the books. I brought Tom on. Number one, the $800,000 Bitcoin buy. I think that's absolutely fascinating. But the post that Tom's been putting out, all the signal that you've been pushing, but I think you'll really be able to open people's minds up to ideas to be able to go out, provide the world value, to be able to earn income, whether that's fiat money or Bitcoin directly, because the whole goal, all I want to achieve is for people to be self-sovereign, to be able to get as much Bitcoin. So I think we'll be able to talk to that. But before we go into the business side of things, and I've got so many questions personally with what I'm doing, what are your thoughts? Like, you're in the UK, from here in Australia. What's happening over there looks so totalitarian. What's happening here is definitely totalitarian. It's going from socialism to more and more communistic. Like, by the day, unrealized capital gains. They want to raise GST taxes, etc. Just tax the rich into oblivion. What's it like for someone like yourself, with like financially independent? What's the rhetoric and the policies, I guess, against wealth accumulation, and like how easy or hard is it your life running a business?
Yeah, I do try to completely ignore all politics chat. So I'm not like up on that, but obviously as a business owner, I have to understand like tax changes. What I have found, and there's probably 2 or 3 reasons, is that it is pretty hard to run a business in the UK. Just a recent one. Well, in the last 2 years, both corporation taxes increased by 25% corporation tax, and then national insurance, which is what we have to pay the government for every employee we have, also went up by probably about 15% this year as well. So they're basically just taking more money from you. At the same time, we have quite harsh like labor laws on the employer side. E.g., it's quite hard to, or you can get a lot of trouble for not treating people the right way. And obviously, we try to treat people the right way, but that can be quite challenging as well. So if and when I ever don't run Fame, there would definitely be a chance that I would have a corporation set up in another place. Fortunately, that's getting easier and easier to do, especially with a remote business. So, yeah, I can't really comment on like the government, but what I can say is that it has got harder to run a business since I started Fame 5 years ago.
Yeah. And do you have anything in place to be able to mitigate that? Is that sort of why you fired off $800,000 of fiat into Bitcoin to be able to go boating? Or like, what's the... No, I'm playing. If you've still got your Bitcoin on an exchange or you're looking to take your Bitcoin security to the next level, I've partnered with the Bitcoin Way. They offer live help for setting up cold storage, running your own node, keeping your Bitcoin private, planning for the future, using multi-sig, and so much more. They never touch your keys. They will not touch your coins. Instead, they'll show you how to buy and keep them safe. If you want to make your Bitcoin setup safer, you can book a free 30-minute call and have a chat with them. Safety Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, Natalie Brunel, Preston Pish, and so many more recommend the professional IT cybersecurity team. Couple of outstanding things here. You can see they've been featured in Forbes, Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Prague, Zero Hedge, Simply Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Safe Team, the Bitcoin Standard podcast with Safety Moose, Bitcoin News, obviously G'day Bitcoin for a long time. They're the world experts in helping people become self-sovereign. It's not just about protecting your Bitcoin stash. Yes, they will help you do that in a very easy to understand step-by-step process. But from there, they can help you secure your data. They are your personal cybersecurity IT experts. And then step number 3 is getting a second passport, a Plan B residency. The team, very cheap, very affordable for people that are looking to take their sovereignty to the next level. You can find out more about their services. When you first log in to their website as well, they have got a free 3-minute quiz to allow you to check if you are doing your cybersecurity, your setup correctly. I urge everyone to jump onto the bitcoinway.com. I have put a link into the description for everyone. Could not recommend them enough. I've used them personally before I ever partnered with them for the channel, friends and family. They asked me to help them out. I'm like, go to the world experts. That is the Bitcoin Way. So reach out to the Bitcoin Way today.
There's quite a complex structure to the, basically, as I was making the 800K buy, I completely reframed Fame's purpose in the world. Fame is the name of the business. And it basically shifted in my mind. And it was probably listening to Sailor's my idol, basically. And the shift was that Fame became a Bitcoin accumulation machine. It was no longer a business. The business exists. The whole thing, that entity exists to get more Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so there's quite I don't know how technical you want to get on the finance and the tax side. But I think I have quite a good setup for the transformed Fame into a Bitcoin accumulation machine. Should I go through it? I'll try and keep it brief.
100%.
Okay, cool. And also the caveat I'll make is that if someone is listening and they're trying to work to stack Bitcoin, this is probably not what you would start doing. I think there's a simpler way, and we can get to that afterwards. But anyway, so step 1, and here's what I think any business should do, is just excess cash goes into Bitcoin. So that's step 1, and we did that. Step 2 then is we need to work out how we get more cash flow. And so one way of doing that, especially we've grown pretty well organically, e.g. through our own channels without acquiring other businesses over the past 5 years. And so I was like, okay, let's look at inorganic growth. And so what I was able to do is, because I have the personal Bitcoin stash as well from the buy in 2014, I don't have all of that. I lost it, got scammed out of it, etc. But what I was able to do is use a service called Ledden to obtain a Bitcoin-backed loan. So I get US dollars by depositing the Bitcoin. Comes to me personally, and then I can then loan that money to the business. Fame will then go and acquire a smaller ancillary company. And what then happens is that Fame's cash flow grows. That enables us to buy more Bitcoin. And at the same time, instead of paying myself dividends, which is not very tax efficient, I can then repay the loan to myself, which is the tax-free cash. And then I have the Bitcoin-backed loan sitting there, which is getting more favorable as the price goes up.
Yeah.
And so we basically have this use of Bitcoin as great collateral to get a relatively low-cost loan. The interest rates are coming down. That goes into the business. Business buys another company to increase cash flow. We buy more Bitcoin. And then ultimately, at the end, potentially Fame could be sold, and then because Fame have higher cash flow, it can be sold for more, and then all that money can then be used to buy more Bitcoin in the end. So that is the setup. Quite technical, not as technical as Sailor's products, but that's how we're currently set up to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible.
I like that. On like Ledin, what are your thoughts? Obviously, you've given control of your keys over to Ledin in regards to getting that loan. Like, how does that sit with you, and how do you mitigate the personal risk? Say Ledin went bust, nothing against him or whatever, but you're just giving up control of your keys, not your coins. Are you like, was it 100% of your 2014 Bitcoin stash, or was it a little bit? And how are you managing that risk?
Yeah. To be clear on the two, I've never got to the heights of the 2014 Bitcoin stash. Like immediately it went down. Basically, it ultimately, I did like the shitcoin thing as well in like 2018, 19, 17. And so it went down to like 25% of the initial stash. Now we're back up. It's the last 6 years, all I've been doing is trying to get back up to the initial 2014 stash. And so now we're at like 75% maybe. But really, it's just hilarious, like if I just, that buy from 2014, if I just kept it, we have like a decade of my time and energy that I could have saved. I don't know, done something else, sat on the beach, and then we'd have 25% more Bitcoin. How am I managing the risk? Yes. When I got those loans, Ledin have recently come up with what's the word where they lend it out? Collateral? No.
Yeah, like rehypothecated.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is that, which is not great, obviously. The risk is mitigated, not very well, to be honest. Like, I think I can do better at this. Future loans will be non-rehypothecated. I know Strike is doing that, and I think now has lower interest rates. But the amount is like 5% of the main stash. Yeah. So collateral wise, I can just keep topping it up. So, but the risk is that Ledin goes bust. Fortunately, Ledin just in the past month have gone Bitcoin only. They used to do like Ethereum, etc. So that's a good sign. They do proof of reserves. I've had calls with them. They seem like a good company, but again, like I don't think it's great risk management.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something I could do better.
The only reason I asked Tom is there'll be a lot of people that are new to Bitcoin. They've only been on for like less than a year or 1 to 2 years or something, and they'll hear players like yourself that have like plenty of fiat cash flow coming in. They've got plenty of Bitcoin. They've got big stacks and stuff, and they start talking about going out on the risk curve, whether it's buying Bitcoin treasury companies like MicroStrategy, MetaPlanet, etc. There's a new one every single day, or lending against the Bitcoin. And they're like, oh, if these people are doing it and they've got such high conviction, I should do it too to be able to increase my stack. But it's probably a little bit of a different game. And I think personally, like, it's your money, your choice. Do what you want, ladies and gentlemen, not financial advice. But just hang around for at least 4 to 5 years, holding spot Bitcoin before you go out and you're an absolute degenerate, like Tom is here. But like 5%, I think that's very clever. It's not like you've gone up and you've put 100% of your stack on there, which could really send people into trouble. If you get a margin call or something, you've got 95% to be able to top it back up. Whereas if someone over collateralizes 50, 60, 70% or something, and it comes down 73%, it's sort of game over and too many tears for my liking.
Yeah, but I totally understand what you're saying. The counterpoints, I think, are like, if somebody is like basically, it's quite hard to get, like, with inflation, etc. Like, it's quite hard to get like financially comfortable, especially if you're in the early stages of your career. Like my parents, for example, would just buy a house, and so I don't really blame people for like going out on the risk curve early on, because some people don't really have any other option. And that's exactly what I did with the Bitcoin buy and with the shitcoining in 2018, 19. I guess I was just fortunate enough not to get completely wrecked. Nearly did a couple of times. And so I'm like kind of glad I did that. And it also taught me like how to now buy and hold. And so I think it is maybe a good thing for people to like shitcoin and do that stuff, but just don't get completely wrecked, because really what you're paying for is the lessons that you can then hold on to later down the line, to like really investing lessons, which is buy and hold good stuff.
I've probably got a counterpoint to that as well, because I shitcoins 1920 and sort of the early part of 2021. And out of all my mates that got in at the same time, like from shitcoin, I had a positive ROI. And people like, oh, like that's great. Like, why do you hate on it so much? While it was positive in fiat terms, I think there's a little bit more to life. Like I was in the Telegram call groups 8, 9, 10 hours a day, going back and forth. And it's just absolute degeneracy. And you spend so much time in there and it's all lies, misinformation, marketing, propaganda. And you are what you consume, like garbage in, garbage out. So you're getting like inundated with just bullshit. And there's like all this greed and people like say this is the new beaut technology stack or the new form of money or whatever it is, and it's just all bullshit to be able to get your money. And we're just seeing like over and over and over again the amount of rug pulls from the founders or the developers and stuff, whereas even though it was ROI positive for me in fiat dollars, at the end of it, you know, made enough to live quite comfortably for a little while. I'm like, no, fuck this. Like, I didn't learn anything. I don't have any skills really to be able to provide the world. So I stayed doing my bullshit job and then started like really like hustling and stacking skills so that I could be in a position where by taking a risk, and like I'm very risk adverse, by taking a risk, knowing that I've got that runway behind me, but also that I've got the skills to be able to at least like start moving in the right direction. And like with business, like so many things just come up all the time. Like we'll have bot attacks, or like our emails are going to spam, or our email server gets shut down, or the website's overloaded. People just aren't seeing things are breaking, etc. And like I didn't learn those skills before getting into this business, but by stacking the skills that I did, when these things come up, I've got enough of a framework and enough tools and enough connection and enough network to be able to go out and ask someone what to do, or to be able to find that information to get just in time learning. Yes, like where I got cut off, I'm not 100% sure. But like instead of wasting all that time, you know, 8 to 10 hours a day, I would have been better just working the bullshit job and then stacking those skills quicker. And then I could have got my own thing. So I guess that's my rebuttal.
But my rebuttal to that, you're saying that technical analysis is not a valuable skill?
I wasn't so much doing technical analysis. I was more going off community sentiment and watching what was going on in the chats, and then starting to pick up on the patterns within the chart. Like there's this one project that every like 2 or 3 days, the coin would pump like 50% or more. And as soon as you saw that happening, you just go in there and you'd be able to sell it because it just absolutely crashed down. And then you'd like sell it at around the 50% and then crash down, and you go in and you can buy it again. And then just do that same thing like over and over and over again. And you'd see like certain people come into these chats and start saying like hodl and we're all going to make it and stuff. And then the just chart starts moving and pumping. You're like, fuck, like let's just take a bit off, take a bit off, take a bit off, take a bit off. It's just so degenerate. But yeah, 100% there are people with technical analysis and stuff. And I guess that's like stacking a skill. If that's the skill somebody wants to stack over the next 2 years to learn TA, like sure, go for it, but at least do it intentionally.
Yeah. I've kind of taken the piss because I don't know how valuable technical analysis is. Anyway, however, can I tell you about my my worst trade, my worst shitcoin trade?
Yeah.
So 2018, there's a tech strategy, maybe similar to the one you shared, called scalping, where you wait for a shitcoin to pump and you go in with large volume and then just come out after 5 minutes. And if you've got a large enough volume, you might make a decent profit. And so I was doing this with 10 Bitcoin, which is completely idiotic. And I remember going into Cardano that was pumping. And if you look at the chart, you'll see a big spike to like 90 cents in 2018. And so I scalped it like at the top, basically. And then I held for a year. And so the 10 Bitcoin basically went down to 2. And I sold a year later, completely idiotic. So that's like an 8 Bitcoin mistake, which now is the 800K, roughly 800K dollar mistake. It was $70,000 at the time, which was tragic. And so, yeah, this is like really big mistakes we're talking about. So maybe I shouldn't advise people to shitcoin.
No, yeah, Bitcoin don't shitcoin. Yeah, like I've got heaps of stories like that, getting into nodes and stuff. buying these nodes and losing 50K on that, and you're just like what the fuck am I doing? This was half my yearly wage or more. It was like 75% of my yearly wage at that time. Just better served elsewhere, in my opinion. But let's talk about making money actually by providing value, because shitcoins do not do that, in my opinion. Full stop. You've got one of the largest B2B podcast businesses in the world. I think it's the third largest. You've just hit 4.2 ARR, annual recurring revenue. Look, how'd Fame come about, I guess? Because before Fame, you had 17 failed businesses, if I'm not mistaken. You're like a management consultant, was it? Which is like very different to a B2B podcast platform.
Yeah, for sure. But you do in consulting, like accounting, professional services, you do learn a lot of skills that are useful in business, like how to write an email, how to run a meeting, etc. But yeah, I basically studied chemistry, then did 4 years in like consulting. Didn't like either of them, and the common the common factor between the two was like having somebody tell me what to do. So I really didn't like that. So I realized I had to leave. This is 2014. And so my goal of the year of 2014, which is the same year of the Bitcoin buy, was to replace my salary with a business. And so I liked the internet, but I couldn't code. So I basically had to learn marketing. And long story short, from 2014 to 2020, I just started and failed at shitloads of online businesses. So really skill stacking for those 6 years. I've never invested because I was so heavily financially invested. So my balance sheet was very Bitcoin focused. My personal P&L, I didn't do anything in Bitcoin. This is like the first time I'm actually talking about Bitcoin like publicly. And so I just spent 6 years getting better at stuff. And so fortunately, that led me to, well, I actually ran out of money. I got too ambitious in one of these businesses, lost the money, and so I had to get a job. But by that time, I had enough marketing skills to become a head of demand generation at a B2B software company. And this is a point where I think this is a good way of making cash to stack Bitcoin. So essentially what I did is when I was employed, we basically got really good at this one process, which was a podcast that we built for my employer to help build brand awareness and to build relationships and partnerships with customers. And that podcast turned out to be very profitable for my employer. And so what I was then able to do was say that, because I realized I couldn't be employed. I was really bad. I basically said, I'm going to leave. Would you like to be the first client of my B2B podcast business? Fortunately, they said yes, because I had done a good job. And then all Fame is just us copying that process and pasting it for about 300 B2B companies. So the lesson there, I think, is a really low risk way of starting a good business. Is that you get a job in something that you're good at and that you enjoy, and then you get really, really good at a specific process. And then if you're good enough at it, when you tell your employer that you're leaving to do this, they will want to pay you as a freelancer. The other great thing there is that whenever a good person leaves a business, the founders or the CEO, they want like a good story to tell the rest of the business, because otherwise it's like bad comms, like, why is this person leaving? Because they not like us. And so for the founder CEO to say to the team, Tom's leaving, but he's staying on a freelance capacity to do this, is a much better story for the team. And so then you basically, you should be able to deliver that one process maybe for like 10% of your time. And then you can just go to the other competitors or other companies in the space and say, look, we're doing this, it's getting great results. Do you want to pay me as well? And you get 3 more clients. And then that's maybe half of your time and maybe double the salary you were getting. And then you can basically either just get more clients, hire people, or just stay as like a consultant freelancer and put all that cash into Bitcoin.
I want to dive into like hiring people and then scaling that, because I think to be able to scale your leverage in your time and the value to be able to increase what you're receiving from the market. But one of the things you said, Tom, is like find a job that you're good at and that you enjoy. And I'd just like to get your thoughts. But we always hear, like I read a lot of personal development books, motivation stuff, like do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I almost think that's like a little bit laissez-faire, a little bit bullshit, because like, say at one stage, like I started a woodworking business here where this podcast studio is now under the house. And like I loved woodworking, and then I did it because I loved doing it. And then like the amount of time to be able to create it for like this minute profit was like just absolute bullshit. So I went back to um, a bullshit job. But when I identified that bullshit job, I'm like fuck, that's not what I love. That's not what I want to be doing. However, like I can learn these skills through that job of doing it, time management, email, cold outreach, etc., customer complaints. Like there's a whole lot of things within that job that I knew that I needed to learn that would continue to benefit me. And once I got good at the job, then I started enjoying the job, but I didn't go into that job because it was something that I'm like, oh yeah, like I absolutely love this. Or it's like flying's my biggest passion in the world. I will never ever do that as a job because I want to keep it as my passion. Like what are your thoughts on that?
I have 2 points. I do think that being good and enjoying stuff are combined. And so even if you don't enjoy something, but you're good at it, go and do it, because ultimately you're probably going to start enjoying it if you get good as you did with that job. And the same as the other way around. If you enjoy something but you're not good, the fact that you enjoy it is probably going to make you good. So I think they're like very linked. The other point I'll pick up on that I really like that you just said is that you specifically got that job to learn. And I think that people, because now you can't like have a family and just one person go to work and make enough money to like have a good life. Like you can't really do that anymore. And so you basically have to work out some other way of getting a benefit from the job to increase your future ability to buy Bitcoin, or future earnings or ability to buy Bitcoin. It's the same thing. And so that's the other thing I would urge listeners to think about is the salary that you're getting from that job is probably not going to be enough to build a good life unless you're in finance. And so you have to work out some other way of getting a better deal from that job. And that could be that you have a future vision to do what I did and take this thing and go and sell it to other people. Or it could be because you just need to learn skills to do this other thing in the future. So those are my 2 thoughts from what you just said.
Yeah, I love it. And I think just one more like takeaway for the audience is find like a job where you can gain these skills and stuff. But I also had a lot of capacity. I was driving around fairly often where I could just put on podcasts and just get the signal and just be able to soak it in. I had time to be able to think back on what I was learning. And somebody the other day, I asked them for like a Michael Saylor interview to be able to pass on to someone. And they gave me a 4-hour podcast with Lex Friedman, Michael Saylor. I'm like who the fuck has this time? And then I just started, they're like, it's so good, just watch him. Like Lex is so dry, like he sounds like a robot. Someone like for the first time, I don't think that's it. But I just started listening to like the first 2 or 3 minutes. I'm like, oh yeah, I've listened to this in full back when I had time, and how things changed so much. And I look back on that bullshit job, I'm like, things were so easy then, man. Like I just didn't know.
But that's another great example of like getting another benefit from the job. I have a couple of friends who are window cleaners, and I'm a little bit jealous because they're self-employed, make decent wage, and they get to listen to podcasts all day.
Yeah.
It's just epic. So that's a really good example.
Yeah, you love that. So let's talk into like scaling. That's something you've done amazing. 70 full-time team members, I believe. Is that correct?
I think 75, yeah.
Yeah, think like so many that you're not even aware 100% how much there is. I've got 7. I was in interviews today hiring for the 8th employee, and mate, like it's intense managing all those people and the amount of emails that come through and the communication, making sure everyone's on track. They're task focused, they're doing the right thing. If like a fire comes up, the right person's doing it, but the task that they're on at the moment is not getting left behind or forgotten about and stuff. How are you managing such a huge group of people? Like 70 people, that's insane. That's I think that would be classed as like a large business here in Australia.
Mm. Yeah, I think so. What we're talking about is the skill of management, and the ultimate hack here is to hire managers, though. Hire and train good managers. So we have a leadership team of 3 people who manage the majority of those people, and so I just manage them. And because they came up from the bottom of the business, that they understand exactly how we like to work, etc. So that's like the hack. But obviously, you can't in the early days, afford to hire good managers or hire managers and train them. And so what works for me is it's very hard to manage somebody well if you don't know how to do the job yourself.
Yeah.
And so pretty much every job in Fame, there's like 10 different roles, maybe more, aside from like detailed technical editing, I can do. And so what happened is that I was doing everything at the start, and then I would document something, hire somebody, they would be responsible for doing it. And then it would be very easy for me to manage them because I can tell them what to do. They also like being managed by me because I was adding value to their lives because I was training them. And then we just kept going like that, documenting, hiring, handing over, documenting, hiring, handing over. And it's still a process now. As you lead the business, you're trying to get as elevated and out of it as you possibly can. And so you're constantly trying to document stuff and get other people to do it. So to summarize, like hire and train good managers once you have enough money. But before then, you have to be good enough at every job in order to document it and then have somebody else run that process. And then the final point on that is they're responsible for keeping that role document up to date.
Yeah.
Because it just clarifies for everybody what they're supposed to be doing. And then B, if they ever leave, then it's relatively easy for them to train their replacement. So those are my management thoughts.
I want to dive into this out of my own selfish personal reasons, and I truly, for everyone watching, I hope this adds value. But like what I've been doing, I just wrote down do, document, hire, hand over as those stop points. But for myself as well, I want to know everything, at least how it works, or have like a basic or a fundamental foundation of understanding to be able to know people aren't like either ripping me off or they're on the right path, or if something comes up, I can assist and be able to learn to be able to get past that bottleneck. But what I've been doing is I'll do something and I'll get to the capacity where I need to farm it out. So I'll just record it with OBS, a screen share, same as like Zoom or whatever, just sharing the screen. And just like 3 to 4 minute videos. At the start, I was making them at like 10-minute videos. I'm like, fuck, nobody's going to watch this. So I like cut them down in time. And then I'd get on a Zoom call with them. I'd show them how to do it. And then I'd get them to do it. And then I'd send them the video and then said, can you write like a standard operating procedure and a checklist to be able to do it? Is that sort of like the process you're following, or do you have a better process that I can incorporate?
No, I think that's actually better. One thing I didn't mention is that when I worked for these consulting companies, I was actually working on like outsourcing projects. And so we would take like a lot of work from Vodafone in Europe and then give it to us, like Accenture in India, and then we'd hand it over to Vodafone in India. So it's like taking work offshore. And a big thing I learned there is exactly what you described, which is forward and reverse job shadowing. So you're basically showing them how you do it, and then they do it and you watch them. That's the forward and reverse job shadowing. And then what you've also done well there is you've done the video because it's very easy and fast for you to create. But then you have them write the working procedure. The problem with video, or the pros of videos, is they're fast to create, but the problems are you can't edit them very easily. And so really you want the written document. And it's good that you're getting them to write it, because then that's going to help them learn it. So your process is very good. That's right.
Well, need a shout out to Dan Martell, and if you haven't read the book, Buy Back Your Time. I think even as an entrepreneur like yourself, you'd gain incredible value. I could not recommend that book enough for any business owner, small or large, or anyone that wants to just buy back their time. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely incredible.
I kind of always had a VA until I read that book, and then I was like, okay, well, let's do this properly. And so now I have this guy called Clay in the Philippines who's like literally any piece of admin task goes on the trading board and he manages it. And yeah, I don't think I'll ever be able to go without an assistant anymore.
Yeah. Just looking at that's why I was in interviews today, is looking for an assistant, and I think like just overwhelmed. We'll bring on more people. Like today, we celebrated our first year in business, and as a profitable first year, which was pretty cool.
Nice.
Keep the tax man happy. I don't know where they were for 25% all that work, but they've got their hand out for it's like, fuck, this is painful. But whatever, it's amazing to first year in business, and for it to be profitable, it's pretty cool. But
What's the name of the business again, or is it secret?
Publicly, it's a secret. Just until we come on, I'll do a proper dedicated podcast.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, I really saving it, just time capacity. My wife's my business partner, to be able to get us both together where we've got the brain space and the capacity. It's that's hard, man. It's absolutely insane. Louise will be working on one thing and I'll be working on something else. Like, all right, we'll get there eventually. So it's coming, ladies and gentlemen. But we can talk about it off stage, Tom. That's no issue. Okay, so like getting an assistant, and so that obviously like frees up your time, and you're just managing the managers who are managing those people. What other ways can you scale a business? Like, I guess like you've got 300 people on board, 4.1 million in annual recurring revenue. You're not going to get to 4.1 million ARR like with one client. So like, how do you scale a business? And are there some like takeaways that could apply to more than just B2B podcasts?
Yeah, because I spent a decade trying to sell things online as a marketer, and so obviously in the debate between like what's more important, marketing/sales or product, I should be on the marketing side, right? But in reality, my biggest insight for scaling a business is a phrase that I learned in a marketing course called Reforge. And the phrase is retention is the foundation of growth. The team take the piss out of me because in every other meeting, I'm talking about how retention is the foundation of growth. And so what that means is you just have to try and build a product or service that's better in some way than all your competitors. If you do that, marketing is just really fucking easy, because you can spend any amount to get them, because they're going to stay for ages and they're going to tell your friends. And so you actually have to be a lot less good at marketing if your product is great. And so that's what we tried to do. But in terms of like what to do in marketing, one thing that I've realized recently is that there's like low hanging fruit and high hanging fruit. There's people that are like either working with a competitor or are actively looking for the thing you provide. Hopefully you're not like a super crazy tech startup that is something that no one's looking for. That's like much more challenging. That's like business on super hard level.
Yeah.
And so what we do at Fame, in order to retain profitability to buy as much Bitcoin as possible, is that we don't even care about these people that are not looking to start a podcast. So we don't do any outbound to companies that may want a podcast at some point in the future, because that's too expensive, because you have to do all this spamming, first of all, which is not good for the brand. And then you need really expensive salespeople to convince people to start a podcast if they're not planning on doing it. And so all we do is focus on these people that are looking. And so what does that mean? It means that we have a partnership program. So whenever someone's like speaking to their marketing leadership group, or I want to start a podcast, do you know anyone? Then ideally we have a partner there. Second is Google, both paid and organic. That's what we've done since day one. E.g., if somebody's searching for B2B podcast agency, organic or paid, we're going to be at the top. And those are the top 3 channels. So like very low cost. And that enables us to be profitable at a slightly lower price point, which then enables our service to be epic. So they retain and then tell their friends. That's like the theory. It obviously doesn't work as well as that in practice, but those are my thoughts on how to grow a business, basically.
Yeah. So it's sort of like, instead of trying to sell your bright idea, going out to the market, doing some market research, finding out what people really need. Like, people have got problems. They're already a little bit warmed up to the idea of that there's some possible solution, just coming in with like the best solution possible for their issue.
Exactly. Yeah. A really good business approach is that you find a growing industry that has companies already doing well, and then you just essentially copy what they're doing, but make it slightly better for a smaller niche of the growing industry. So in our case, I didn't think about this consciously, but this is how you'd apply that framework to what we've done, is that podcasts were growing as like a thing. And so there was a lot of podcast agencies. And then we were like, okay, well, a business is going to start podcasts. And so we're like, yeah, we started to see a few of them doing it. So we're like, okay, well, let's just jump on that train. But instead of competing with all these other people that are doing well and are established, we'll just take a smaller niche, which is the businesses that want to podcast. And then we were like, almost immediately when we released the service, we were slightly better for that smaller niche because we were focused on their problem. And then now, after we've run over 300 shows, we're just like completely specialized to that problem. And so whenever any business is now looking, any B2B business, sorry, is looking to start a podcast, then we're just there because there's only really 3 of us that have been doing this for any serious length of time. And so then we're immediately in the conversations for any B2B business looking to start a podcast, which then means that we don't have to go and try and convince other people to start podcasts. And these people are much cheaper to acquire because they're already looking.
Mate, that's absolute gold. There's this tweet, and sorry, we've only got a few minutes left, so you just put out so much valuable information, but it was this one here, 6 days ago. Step 1, move ownership of a biz to a holding company. Step 2, also use holding company to charge for speaking, consulting, sponsorships. Step 3, when you sell, move funds to holding company, tax-free in the UK anyway. Step 4, compound that cash over a decade, and then and convert all excess cash to Bitcoin, obviously. What framework are you laying out there, and why? I guess what set up that tweet, what inspired that tweet?
Yeah, I think it's 2 things. First is I think maybe like most entrepreneurs, like really value novelty and new things, and can get bored quite quickly. And so like that type of personality, I think, is quite attractive to the holding company model, where you can like just jump in and do something and jump out. You don't have to be committed for a long period of time. So that was like brewing for a while. And then at the same time, I'm a big, he's not a Bitcoin bull, obviously, but I'm reading a lot of Warren Buffett stuff. And it's funny because he hates Bitcoin, but a lot of what he says is like very aligned with Bitcoiners, e.g.
100%.
buy stuff that's worth something and hold it for a decade, only do 11 investments in your life, etc. So the big thing I learned from Warren Buffett is you just have to stay in the game. He bought his first stock when he was 11, and then like 50% or like 98% of his net worth came after he was 65. So we just have to stay in the game. If we combine that with the fact that I think everybody should be creating content on the internet, it's like a cheat code basically for growing a business, making money, etc. And so that job of creating content on the internet, podcast, email list, social, is a forever job. It's something that you should be doing forever, because it shouldn't necessarily be directly attached to one of your actual businesses or brands. And it's a very profitable way of making money once you grow to a certain scale, through consulting, if you want to do that, sponsorships, and speaking. And so that the forever job, the job you're always going to be doing, is creating content and consuming content about stuff you're interested in, belongs in the holding company. And then if you ever start a business, the holding company is just going to own the whole of that business. Your personal brand and all that content can support and drive customers to that business, but it doesn't belong to that business. It's just in the holding company. And then it's relatively tax efficient, because any profits, or if you have to sell one of the child businesses, those profits can go, that cash or profits can go to the holding company without paying tax. And then you can essentially, here's the Berkshire Hathaway model, use that cash to then either buy Bitcoin, or if you think there's a business or opportunity that's going to get more than 50% compound annual growth rate, you can do that. And then the cycle continues. And then in theory, you're just going to build up this massive cash balance in the holding company. And then I guess at some point you're going to have to pay some tax when you take it out to bring it to your person. So that's the current strategy that I'm following, and it's really just lifted. It's basically stolen from Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett.
Yeah, I like it, and we've got a holding company and stuff, and for at least in Australia, and I don't know if it'd be applied to yourself over there, Tom. Not financial advice. Everything I say, I'm just making it up. It's actually what we're doing, but just fucking do your own research. I'm not advising anyone to do this. But if a family trust owns the shares to the holding company, and the holding company owns the shares to to whatever businesses and stuff, when you go to pay dividends with the trust structure, at least here in Australia, those dividends don't need to be split equally. So if like your partner is earning less than you, for example, she can get the dividend. It can be split 70-30, or just 30% goes to her, the rest stays in the trust and stuff. So there are smarter ways, whereas if it's just like a holding company, at least here in Australia, the shareholders need to be paid equal dividends, and there's no way around that.
That's very nice. That's a very nice insight, and not one that I was aware of. So thank you, Sean.
No drama, not financial advice. Please do your own research, people. But like I guess what I'd really like to hear from you, and we're sort of what we were saying before we hit record, Tom, is I believe if people don't run their own race, at least eventually, like stay with the bullshit job, go out, create side hustle after side hustle after side hustle, create little businesses and stuff, whatever you can, like to be able to acquire the skills to be able to go out into business, but to be able to create freedom. I think the only way people are truly going to be free is holding Bitcoin in self-custody and running their own race in life. Like same with you, mate. I fucking hate people telling me what to do. And even though I've been employed for a lot of like leaving school, like I've always been the manager or the boss or the location manager or whatever it is, or just like independent. And if I work as part of a team, it's like very quickly I'll become the manager of that team, or I'll just go into another field within that organization to be the manager, or just be in control of more, so have autonomy, because I just can't stand it. So like that's one bonus to going into business for yourself, but like it's also like the hardest thing that I've ever fucking done. Like before this year and stuff, like last year, major epic business failure, like best mate from high school and stuff, like we're just not speaking, nor will I ever like engage with them ever again. Like business, it's so hard, and it just feels like some days you get whacked in the back of the head with a baseball bat, and you need to get back up, and you need to put on a smile, and you need to go hard, and you need to show up for everyone when you're talking to customers or you're dealing with someone that's a little bit hard. Like that can be like, it's just difficult. It's just really, really hard. And I don't think like, oh, I'm going to start my own business doing what I love and it's all going to be easy. Fucking good luck. Like I hope that happens for someone out there, but any successful business owner, I don't think that's true for them. Like what do you think the benefits are going into business?
I think it's what I love about business is that it's like maybe the word is free market. Like it's a competition, and it's quite hard to cheat unless you're in finance. And what that essentially means is that you're like completely responsible. Like how good you are is like will define the results you get. And even if you have a team, let's say you have a team and then the salesperson fucks up and doesn't close the deal, like you might think that that's the salesperson's fault, but in reality, if it's your business, you're the owner and you hire them, then it's your fault. And so then you're like, okay, how do I get better at hiring or training? So that's what I like about it. And so it almost forces you to get better. And I think one of my highest personal values is growth and entrepreneurship. And so it really forces me to do the thing that I love doing, which is to improve and get better. So I would say though that if someone's listening and like personal growth, entrepreneurship isn't their highest value, and maybe they value like social or family or something else, then maybe it isn't the right thing to do. But that doesn't mean that you can't make more money in other ways and stack more Bitcoin. So
100%. Sorry to cut you off. I don't think everyone's designed to be an entrepreneur, but for the people that are born or they're thinking about it, I don't think there's anything better. And I think to sum up, it's like complex problem solving. It's like a giant puzzle.
Agree, yeah.
Have you read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink?
I think I started the audiobook, but I didn't finish it. But I think I understand the the theme of the book.
Yeah, 100%. What you were saying just before, 100% is the premise. It's a good book for everyone because nobody's coming to save you. This morning I was listening to a interview, and not someone that I would really listen to all that often, but it's Kevin O'Leary on the Diary of a CEO. I think that's a pretty interesting podcast, definitely for listeners of this channel to listen to, not because I agree with Kevin or not, but just he's talking about like interacting with people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and their drive and not listening to the customers and stuff, and why they were wildly successful. And I'm not saying everyone should go out and be a narcissistic prick, but to be able to like take what works or take what we like and then discard the rest. I thought that was a high value podcast takeaway. I'd probably watch on 2x speed, and I haven't. As sort of just on my way to the gym and on the way back, and I won't listen to the end of it. I gained enough and listened to it enough, but there was some cool takeaways. But Tom, we're coming to the end of our time because you're a big reader. They don't need to be Bitcoin books. We sort of started that at the start, but maybe like your top 5 book recommendations or your favorite reads, and maybe just like a short reason for why, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'll just go off the top of my head. One that is Bitcoin related, but also epic, is American Kingpin, the book about Silk Road. Because it is like tangential to Bitcoin, but an epic story of like building what was a great business, not commenting on its legality, the Silk Road founder. So I'll put that in there. I'll put in The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. I think it kind of explains a lot about life, especially the first 1 or 2 chapters. What else should we put in there? In terms of just business, this was probably the most influential business book, is The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco.
Dude, I'm reading his second book right now.
It's what's that, The Road to Wealth or something?
I am reading it on Kindle, so I don't look at it while you're explaining the book. Highly recommend. I'll look for the title of it.
Yeah, so that's a banger. Ignore the like scamminess of the title, but it's just his story of how he built a good business and his learning. Next up, and this was also pretty crucial for orange pilling back in like 2016. It was a book called The Road to Ruin by Jim Rickards. You know that one?
Yeah.
He's like a gold bug, hates Bitcoin, but he basically explained back then like why he thinks the US dollar is going to fail because of the debt, and now that's like a much more trendy topic. And so it's a bit negative, but it definitely forced me to think more about that and made me more bullish on Bitcoin. So that's 4. Then let's try and find one more. I think the books I most enjoy are like these business, crime, finance books. And so probably the best one like I remember of those is called, it's about the story of Joe Low, the Malaysian guy. I'll just get the name of the book. Joe Low book. $1 Billion Whale. Nothing to do with Bitcoin, but like finance, crime, story. So those are the books that I didn't feel like I learned that much, but I just really enjoy reading them.
Yeah. $1 Billion Whale, I'm not sure if I've read that. I've definitely read the other 4. It took me a while for American Kingpin to connect. Epic book. So much fun.
Yeah.
It's Unscripted Life, Liberty, and the Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Entrepreneurship by MJ DeMarco as well. But that Millionaire Fastlane, yeah, like super clickbait title and stuff. But it's like the least clickbait business book that I've ever read. And I've read thousands of books in my life, sort of all on that topic, and truly outstanding.
Yeah, epic book.
I love that, Tom. It's really cool. Number one, like just the post, the signal that you put out, it's always positive. It's never like, truth be told, like on X, I can just talk a whole lot of shit, a whole lot of dribble, and a little bit of rage bait and stuff. If I see something stupid in the news, I'll react to it or whatever like that. But whenever I interact with you, it's always kind, courteous, professional. The image that you're putting out is just like well above board. It's so awesome. It's so refreshing. And I guess like when we first really started interacting, I don't know if you remember, but you're talking about like how you look after your team. oh, you don't want to work in the office? Don't work in the office. You want to take time off? Like, go take time off or whatever. And like, they come up to you, hey, I'd like to take 2 hours, and they start explaining, like, I don't care. Just like, you just do what you need to do. As long as the job gets done, like it's all good. Like, I really respect that, and I've admired you for putting that out, and really appreciate seeing that in my feed. Like, when we've got the political cycle last year in the US, the political cycle here in Australia this year, and just like all the nonsense and noise that goes on in X, to have that pure signal that just cuts through, and it's so clear, so concise, and so positive. Huge respect for that, mate.
I appreciate that, man. I can tell you're very well read, which I respect. And yeah, I love the time we had together.
Yeah, we'll get you back on. We'll talk more into the Bitcoin, but I think for the audience, 100% Bitcoin focused channel, but I do want to bring out some videos with entrepreneurs and stuff that are really creating value in the world, which allows you to create wealth to be able to stack more Bitcoin. And that should be everyone's goal, is just to get as much Bitcoin as humanly possible and live a life of intention. But I really thank you for coming on and opening up, and for this to be your first Bitcoin podcast.
My pleasure, man.
Thank you. For everyone out there, I'll put all Tom's links below, but please do something nice for yourself today, for somebody else. Be blessed. Peace.